Rendaa Studios After Effects tutorial. I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and today I'm going to be demonstrating how to create this new particle design. Alright, so you see the design, you see how it's created, a couple layers, and we're done. See you next time. Now, what do we have here? We've got a particle system. We're using Trapcode Particular. It's unfortunate that you can't really use CC Particle World for this. And the reason why is because we're using textured particles. All these particles are based off of a couple of images here, like flowers that I rotoed out and kind of did some stuff with. Anyways, the point is, you really can't use Particle World for the design, and I hate saying that because normally, every design I think I've done before for Rendaa, I've always said, you can definitely use a different particle system if you want. You don't actually have to pay money for a third-party particle system, but this is really one of the few ways to create this on a particle-based system. Now, if you wanted to just randomly place objects in 3D space, there is actually a script for that. But for the purposes of this tutorial, this particle design, we're going to have to use Particular. So that's my explanation of Particular. Now the explanation of the tutorial. So let's take a look at what we've got. Let's shut off this text, the vignette, color grading, and we're to this very crappy looking design. And we'll even shut off the depth of field. Alright, so you can see we've got a ton of flowers here to begin with, and you can see we've got the depth of field kind of separating them, and we kind of focus on a few different ones as we go through. I've got some particles, obviously. But the only other really interesting thing about this design is the lighting. Something cool that I kind of did here was, you can see we've got a couple of standard lights. We've got like a cool light over here in this corner, and then a warmer light down here. And if we turn them off, you can see we've actually got a couple of lights underneath the design. So, two very important things about this tutorial. And those two important things both happen to be compositions. One is a square composition with 4 images in it, our flowers. And the other is everything else, all the particles. Now, the thing that makes it important is, since we have these two designs separated, we can replace them with anything. So, check this out. I'll do a fill, drop it onto an adjustment layer I've got here, and I'm going to fill everything, make it white, hop over here, everything is white. Well, I mean, there's lighting, but all the layers are white. And that's just a cool thing to have with any design, is the ability to very quickly make variations to it. So we need more saturation in the image. Okay, turn off this tint. It's oversaturated. And we'll start by creating this sprite composition. So bring in these flowers, and ways to create a new composition, new composition. And you can also drag some layers into this little deal down here. You can click the little deal down here, or my favorite, Command in. Now, we're going to need to make them the same resolution as the images, so 500 by 500. And the length is actually kind of specific. What we have is 4 images, so we need the frame to be exactly 4 frames long. We need 4 frames. And that's because the particle system is going to be grabbing a random frame and using that as each texture for each different particle. So, 4 frames. Wrong, actually. You need 5. Let me tell you why. And I just want to point this out because this is not a bug or anything. It's just the way that After Effects works. The time code starts at 0 frames. So, what the duration is actually saying is that we're going from 0 frames and stopping at 5 frames. We're not going the full 5 frames. So what we're actually getting when we put in 5 frames, we're actually getting 4 usable frames, and then a 5th one that's not actually going to render. So that's unfortunate, but we can fix that by just adding another frame. If we've got 4 images, we add 5 frames. If we've got 20 images, we add 21 frames. If we've got 68 frames, we had 69. So, new comp, ready to go. I don't know how this got out of the folder, but very specifically created a folder just for flowers with nothing but pictures of flowers. And we'll go ahead and trim these all to be 1 frame long. I'm just dragging that. And we'll drag this work area to only be this first 4 frames. You don't want to trim it though. Normally, I've got a habit of just dragging and trimming it automatically, but you don't want to do that here because you'll just go back to the same error of that last frame won't be usable. The next thing we need to do is sequence these layers. We can drag them out here, which isn't a big deal with 4 frames, and each frame is on a different part of the time now. But what a cool feature that After Effects has is a little script that we can run called animation keyframe assistant sequence layers. Make sure overlap is turned off, and they'll be sequenced for us. And we can still swap places of them if we just feel like we want to. So. The other thing to keep in mind is that these are PNG images, which mean that they have some transparency to them, and you need to make sure that your images are indeed transparent, because if not, well, let me show you what will happen. Very convenient that I've got everything ready to work here. So these are all transparent, but if I add a black solid and put it in the back, come back over here and render, we get this. Not really what we want, so that's why you don't do it. That's why you get the PNGs. And the next thing I'll do is just desaturate these a little bit. So layer, new, solid. I'm just desaturating this because they're a little strong. So I'm creating a new solid, layer, new solid, and just hitting this button right here, adjustment layer, to make it an adjustment layer. And there's an effect called hue and saturation. Oh, by the way, if this effects and preset window isn't coming up, come with the window and effects and presets, or you can actually just scroll through all the effects and find what you're looking for. So on this black solid, effect, color correction, hue and saturation, there it is. And I'll just desaturate a little bit. Okay, moving right along, let's create our composition with the particles. So, another new composition, new composition. This one we'll just do 1080p because that's like the cliched resolution to use. And I generally use about 15 seconds. So we'll bring in comp 1, which is our sprite comp. I'll just hit enter right here to rename it sprite. And also right click and choose rename layer, new, solid. This is going to be particles. And we are using particular, effect, trap code, particular. I didn't search that one. Okay, so for particular, first thing we want to do is come forward in here a little bit so we can see our nice, lovely particles. Actually the first thing we want to do is clarify that this is going to stop constantly sending out particles. It's going to emulate a few and then just stop. So we'll come up to the emitter. Emit a few is what I meant to say. And we'll turn this up to a couple thousand particles. Hit the stopwatch right there. Come over a frame, set it to 0. And that's going to emit 4,000 particles first frame and then not emit anymore. So right now, since they're all fading out, it just looks pretty stupid, but we'll fix that in a second. Hop down to particle, turn up the life. So these things will not die within the 2 seconds we're here. Okay, so now we've got more to work with. Next thing I'll do is I'll change the emitter type to a box, and I'll turn the velocity to like 5. We want there to be like next to no velocity for these particles. We don't want them to move very much at all. You can see we've got some very light movement here. They're just kind of very slowly spreading out. Awesome. And then we'll just space these out quite a bit. Okay. I like to try to get things lined up before I start adding the textures and slowing down the render speed a lot. That's why I'm doing it right now. So if you know what you're looking at, just imagine each one of these white dots is going to be a flower in about 25 seconds. So just keep that in mind. Awesome. And I'll actually trim up this comp a little bit because it takes it a couple of seconds to really get all the particles where they need to be. So I'll just trim it a little bit. Now let's hop back down to particle, change it to the sprite, and then for our texture we'll use Dr. Pepper. Okay, and it's going to give us a warning that it's a big. Normally, for whatever reason, Particular doesn't want to use sprites larger than 100 pixels, but it still will, so I don't see why it even tells us. The time sampling, we're going to set to random still frame, and you can see it'll just select a random still frame. What you can't see is the actual flowers that it's selecting, so we'll need to scale those up quite a bit. Of course, the scale is up to you depending on, you may be doing like a super Thanksgiving design and you just really want to see like one flower the whole time. You may want to see 1,000 flowers, you may just want to see, it's your generic amount of flowers. About that many. Awesome. Now, we want to kind of scrub through here and make sure that things aren't overlapping too much. You can see whenever these kind of overlap, they just pop. One frame they're there and one frame they're not. So what we can do to kind of prevent those from overlapping is if we come to the velocity and let's see, instead of doing velocity, what we might do is have them not move. That way we won't have to worry about them intersecting on the z-axis, which is where that's going to be. And what we might do instead is keyframe the emitter size x and y, and then just come here and space them out a little bit. Okay, and so then after we do that, we'll just get some movement. And that's it for the particles, actually. We've got the movement set up and everything. The one thing we still do need to do is we need to go to the visibility, not the visibility, the shading, and we need to turn it on and tell it to use the After Effects shading. We use the actual... Alright, and now we need lights. Layer new light. Okay, kind of a warm light. That's a good idea. Actually, I'll make it like an orange, okay? And then I'll stick it right here above everything. You can kind of already see how we could very easily just kind of stick a couple of lights kind of down in here. Might already do that. It's a pretty good idea. Get another one. I like to contrast. Wait, that's a solid. Layer new light. And I like to contrast cool colors and warmer colors. And kind of try to create something cool doing that. So you definitely don't want to overuse that particular idea, but it is a fun idea to play with. Just don't overuse it. So let's see. Stick it about there. And those are really harsh lights. They're very heavily colored, but for these other lights that we're just going to throw on top, I'll bring them a lot closer to white so that they'll be brighter. And let's see. And we'll just kind of throw on some light here. And we might want to intensify these a little bit. So drop down our options and bring up the intensity. Definitely worse ideas to have. Okay, good. I like to keep it kind of dark with this design. This one's a cool design, so I don't want to mess it up. And I'll add another light. Make it warmer. And stick it somewhere over here. Okay, so you can feel free to add as many lights as you want. If you're moving through the scene and you feel that you need more light, add more light. Next thing we want to do is add a new camera. So layer new camera. And I'll do 50mm just because it's not going to actually move the focal length really much at all. And we'll do a simple camera animation here. I'll do this little, take this pan tool. By the way, if you just hold down right here, you can select different tools. I'll just kind of move this over a little bit, drop down here to the transform, keyframe the point of interest and the position, drag them off here, and then come to the very end, and then just a little bit more, a little bit more movement. And next thing we want to do is create some depth of field, because that is always going to make a design cooler. Turn on the depth of field. Can't really see anything, so we'll just turn up the blur level to like 1000. And we'll also turn up the aperture a little bit. I like to turn it up to like a macro shot so that I can really see where I'm focusing. You can see I'm kind of focusing towards the bottom of this design. Some of these flowers that are in the lower, so I'll just bring this up until I'm focusing on some of the elements that I actually want to be focused on. Okay, so you can see like here, kind of focus on this red flower. And I like that, so I'll just keep it. And I'll come forward a little bit more and I might want to focus on a different flower. I'll kind of try to focus a little bit more on this blue flower right here. And then somewhere towards the beginning I might want to focus on a different one, maybe. Focus on like kind of this yellow one a little bit. You can tell. And then if we just bring up the blur level and the aperture a little bit, we can really get a very heavy macro shot. Yeah, there we go. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Now, the blur level and the aperture is where you really get to kind of play with the way that your design looks and decide, really what kind of variation you're going for in your design. So you can do these really close-up macro shots like I'm doing right here, or you can have basically no depth of field at all. Those aren't your only two options, but those are like the two extremes, so I thought I'd throw those out there. Alright, so here's this design, and we're almost done actually. So the last thing I want to do, well, one of the last things I want to do, there's a couple more things, is I want to add a vignette, and I want to do some color grading. So first things first, we'll actually do an adjustment layer this time. With this color grade, what I actually did in the original, I thought it looked pretty cool, was I used a little effect called CC Composite. And what this does is takes the image and puts it back on top of itself. So I know that sounds pointless right now, but we can actually change the blending mode. So we can have an overlay on top of itself, which is pretty cool. And then we'll do another just quick saturation. Woo! Saturation. And bring it down a little bit. Keep it down. And curves is always fun. Okay. You can add some different colors and like the shadows and the highlights if we really want the design to kind of start to lean one way. I have kind of a retro look now, kind of some nice blues and purples in the shadows. I'll do another new solid. And I'll change it to the blending mode to soft light. Yeah, and then I'll just take this little, again, if you hold down the mask options, you can get different shapes. I'm just using the circular one. Change the mode to subtract. Hop down here, bring up the feathering a little bit. And then if I come to transform, I can lower the opacity a little bit. Good to go. This is looking pretty good. The last thing we need to do is actually add some text so this design will say something. It is a title sequence, so I'll do a flower particle design. And see if I can spell this time. Okay, so looking pretty nice, honestly. We've got some text here. I didn't really do any animation to the text in the beginning, or in the original, because I thought it looked kind of cool, just stationary. The flowers were kind of lightly moving along, so I thought it looked cool if the text just kind of was there and did its thing. However, one kind of elegant way that we can have the text animate on, this is one of my favorite tricks to do, is we'll go ahead and do a fade, like you would normally seem to do, because that's the most generic way to add text on. And so we'll have our fade, but then what we'll do is we'll add a blur to it, or you can even do like a what's it called, displacement, turbulent displace, or any weird kind of thing that just to distort the text in any way you can have going on while it's fading in. So with the blur, if we keyframe the blurriness and then have the blurriness come completely to zero right after we come to 100% opacity, it looks very nice. And if we come to the beginning and turn up the blurriness some so that it actually looks like it's kind of coming in the whole time, looks pretty cool. It's a much more elegant way to kind of fade this in than just a generic 100 to 0% opacity. Anyways, this has been another Rendaa Studios After Effects tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to check out the rest on Rendaa Studios. They have got some incredible tutorials to check out, as well as some templates. Be sure to check them out. Oh yeah, and there's also an E there. Oh, now I just broke everything.